Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Type in the video today, and today I'm going to be talking about Houston Texans training camp battles that you need to be watching throughout the training camp, and the preseason. As tomorrow, Houston Texans training camp starts at 9 a.m. It's going to be so fun, Texans fans. I can't wait. First day is tomorrow, Thursday, July 26th, and I'm not going tomorrow, which I actually don't even know if they're having fans tomorrow. But I am going August 4th, which I'm really excited about. But I wanted to go over some battles I'm really interested to watch, and training camp and preseason, and why those battles should be fun to watch, and why you should keep a close eye on some of these battles I'm going to be talking about today. And I'm going to go over the most important one to start, and the one that is probably the biggest one and the most important one. And that is the quarterback position. That's between C.J. Stroud and Davis Mills. I mean, yeah, the second overall pick versus the quarterback that was the Texans starter last year, started in 15 of the 17 games. It's going to be interesting to see if C.J. Stroud's going to be able to win that, week one job. I think he will be able to. I think probably most of the preseason, Davis Mills will probably be the QB1 throughout most of the preseason. But I think C.J. Stroud will earn that QB1 position. I think that's what the Texans staff and D'Amico are trying to get C.J. to do is earn that. Don't just win it. Make it a fight. And I hope, to be honest with you, I don't want Davis Mills to be the starter. To be honest with you guys, I don't want Davis Mills to be the starter week one. That is the last thing I want. But I want Davis Mills to bring some trouble for C.J. Stroud, so he fights for that. He fights for that job. Because I don't want him to win it easy. I want him to fight for it. And, I want CJ to start week one. I think CJ deserves to be the starting quarterback week one. But I hate just, handing that quarterback week one position. Or not even week. I mean, I'm fine giving him, the week one starter. But I'm okay with the Texans, making it a battle. If they even, I wouldn't even care if they make it a QB battle throughout the whole preseason. But I think it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. I think Davis Mills could maybe be a little bit improved. I'm not saying, we should start him. Hell no. But, I mean, the Texans, they've added in better weapons. I mean, you can't ignore that. John Mechie is healthy this season. They've added in Noah Brown and Robert Woods in free agency. They drafted Tank Dell. They signed Dalton Schultz. They signed Devin Singletary. They signed Mike Boone. They upgraded the offensive line. They also signed Andrew Beck. This offense has improved. And this offense was terrible last season for Davis Mills. So maybe Davis Mills improves a little bit with a boosted offense, and that maybe makes him a little bit better. That's something I'm going to be interested in watching throughout training camp and preseason, mostly preseason for Davis Mills, because I'm interested to watch how he does with some of these new players, see how he plays with some of these new guys, because a lot of guys in the offense, Davis did not play well with last year. The only really guys he played with in the offense last year were Nico Collins and Dameon Pierce. Robert Woods he didn't play with. John Mechie was on the roster, did not play with. Most of the line he played with, but he's not throwing the ball to them. So I mean, he threw the ball to Brevin Jordan and Tegan Quintanaro as well. I guess you can say that too. But I mean, I think Davis with this new, with all these new guys, could be a different player. But at the same time, I still don't think that is enough for him to win the QB1. And it definitely deserves to go to C.J. Stroud. But it's still going to be a fun battle to watch throughout preseason and training camp. Next thing I'm going to go over is the running back position. I don't think there's any strict battles at the running back 1 or the running back 2, but I'm looking at further down in the depth chart, and that is between Mike Boone and Dare Ungabalwe. Mike Boone is a guy the Texans signed. He's a guy I like, but Dare Ungabalwe was someone for the Texans last year who was starting to play some really solid football last year. I was really liking what I was seeing from him. He's a guy I think if he can, play well in the preseason and in training camp, he's a guy I think could potentially make the 53-man roster. And actually something interesting I saw was on ESPN's 53-man projection roster predictions, they actually had the Houston Texans going with 4 running backs on their going with 4 running backs on their 53-man projection. They didn't have either one of Mike Boone or DeRay getting cut, but I still think the Texans are going to go with 3 running backs instead of 4. And I think most likely Mike Boone will, be the guy to stay. But I think that could be a really interesting battle to watch throughout Texans preseason. Is the running back, the running back 3 between Mike Boone and DeRay Ungabalwe. And then nothing specific with the wide receiver position. Just like all the wide receivers. I mean, look how much talent there is at that wide receiver position. You have Nico Collins, Robert Woods, John Mechie III, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Xavier Hutchinson, Amari Rogers, Jalen Camp. I don't think Jalen Camp has a chance to make this roster. I guarantee you he'll probably get signed to the practice squad for the Texans because Jalen Camp is a guy the Texans like to bring onto their practice squad. But look how, there are... I read 5 names right there that I think could be starters for the Texans, and there will only be 3 for the Texans this year. Nico can be a starter for the Texans at the wide receiver position. So can Robert Woods, in my opinion. John Mechie can be a starter for us and is capable of being a starter. Tank Dell could be a starter and is capable of being a starter. And same thing goes for Noah Brown. I can't really say that for Xavier Hutchinson, but he is a damn good wide receiver as well. The talent at this position that wasn't there, last year. Yes, we had Brandon Cooks and we had Nico Collins, but the wide receiver position has improved a lot for the Texans this year. John Mechie has returned. They signed Robert Woods and Noah Brown. They drafted Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson. Nico Collins is expected to be way better this season. I think that position has improved a lot this year. And it's going to be the wide receivers are going to be really fun to watch throughout the preseason and training camp. I'm going to go with the tight end position. Obviously, Dalton Schultz is a lock to be the starting tight end week 1 and probably throughout the whole season unless he's hurt. Knock on wood for the Texans. But I'm looking at the second and third guys in the roster. Brevin Jordan and Tegan Quantanaro. I prefer Tegan over Brevin Jordan, but I think Brevin Jordan has the edge right now for that tight end 2 as of right now, because I think Brevin Jordan is probably a guy CJ Stroud would probably have more chemistry on the field. I think Brevin Jordan plays to more of CJ Stroud's play type, and not only that, but Tegan Quantanaro is also out, and I don't know how long he will be out for. He's a guy who's very injury prone. It should be if Tegan Quantanaro is able to go week 1 preseason, I think it's going to be really interesting to see who wins the backup tight end spot between Brevin Jordan and Tegan Quantanaro. 2 solid draft picks. I've heard some rumblings that maybe there's a chance Brevin Jordan could potentially be cut by the Texans and not make the 53-man roster, but I really doubt that happens. And then another position, another battle I'm potentially looking at for the Texans is the fullback position. I think Andrew Beck will probably make the 53-man roster and be the lone fullback. But Troy Harrison, a guy who played fullback quite a bit for the Texans last year at fullback, I think, the fullback position is a really rare position in the NFL now, and I think that should be something interesting to watch between Andrew Beck and Troy Harrison, even though I think Andrew Beck has quite a bit of an advantage. With the offensive lines, I'm looking at the center competition. You have so much depth at the center position when it comes. You have Juice Druggs and Jared Patterson you drafted. You have Scott Quisenberry and Michael Dieter. I'm really interested to see out of those 4 guys right there. I don't think all 4 guys make it. Who gets cut? I don't think it's Patterson or Struggs. Both guys just got drafted. I really think they have some decent potential. Could either one of or both of Scott Quisenberry or Michael Dieter get cut? I think if it's going to be either one of those, it's going to be Scott Quisenberry. I think it could even potentially be both of those guys. But all 4 of those guys around the center position is going to be really interesting to watch the center battle between the Texans, as that position was terrible for us last year. Offensive line, there's nothing really. Laramie Tunsil, he's a lock at left tackle. I think Kenyon Green's probably a lock at left guard, and then Shaq Mason's a lock at right guard, and then same thing for Titus Howard at right tackle. How about the defensive end position for the Texans? That's something interesting, I guess you could say, for the Texans. I mean, you got a defensive end. You have Jonathan Grenard and Will Anderson Jr., and then those are your left. Those are your left defensive ends, and then you have Jerry Hughes, Chase Winovich, Derek Rivers, and Dylan Horton. I'm interested in who's going to be the second starter at the defensive end position. That's the battle I am looking at for defensive end. Is the second starter? Who is it? Is it John Grenard? Is it Jerry Hughes? Is it even potentially maybe Jacob Martin? I doubt it, but could it be? I mean, there's a lot of talent at that defensive end position. Will Anderson is definitely is a starter for the Texans at that defensive end position. But who is the second starter at defensive end? Is it Grenard? Is it Hughes? Is it potentially Jacob Martin? Is it maybe even someone else? Who knows? But the Texans got a lot of talent at that defensive end position. You have Will Anderson Jr., John Grenard, Dylan Horton, Derek Rivers, Chase Winovich, Jerry Hughes. And then another position I'm looking at is defensive tackle. You have, another lot of talent at the defensive tackle position. Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankings are the guys that are projected to be the starters at defensive tackle. But then you also have Roy Lopez, Hassan Ridgeway, Thomas Booker the fifth, and Brian Cowart at the defensive tackle position. That's a position at defensive tackle I'm going to be really interested in watching, and it should be really interesting to see who become the starters. I mean, Sheldon Rankings is out right now. I don't know how long he will be out for. Maybe that gives an advantage to someone else like Roy Lopez or Hassan Ridgeway or maybe even Thomas Booker the fifth. But I think it's going to be really interesting to watch for the Texans at that defensive tackle position as well. And then I guess I would say the linebacker position is an interesting thing to watch as well. I don't think there's any battles there. I mean, I think Christian Harris and Denzel Perryman are definitely the two starters at the linebackers right there. But the third linebacker is where it becomes interesting to me. And I look at Christian Kirksey. He's the projected middle linebacker for the Texans this year. Could the Texans potentially go with rookie fourth-round pick Henry Tuoto from Alabama, who I think is a stud and I think is going to be a great selection in this draft. I think he has a lot of good potential, and him playing with his former teammate in Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama, that's something I really think me just thinking of, like, could that be potentially a battle between those two? Because we've heard rumblings that Christian Kirksey could be another guy just like Brevin Jordan that could be cut by the Texans. So that is a battle I'm going to be looking at. I'm going to be looking at how Tuoto does during training camp and preseason, and going to be looking, okay, is Christian Kirksey, could he get cut, and can Tuoto start for the Texans? But that besides linebacker, that's really the only thing that I think is an interesting potential battle to look at for the Texans. And then corner, that's another one for the Texans. I mean, you have at the corner position, you of course Stingley is your starter, but I mean, who's going to be the second? I mean, the battle for the second starting corner for the Texans. You have Desmond King the second. You have Shaq Griffin, Steven Nelson, Tavier Thomas. Who is the second starter? I lean towards Shaq Griffin. I think he's a stud. But if not Shaq Griffin, I would say probably Desmond King the second. He's a guy I've always liked since the Texans have signed him, and he's played here the last 2 seasons. But I do think Shaq Griffin will be the second starter at the cornerback position as the corner two, the cornerback two. But I think it should be a battle to watch between guys like Steven Nelson, Shaq Griffin, Desmond King the second, and Tavier Thomas. All 4 of those guys potentially be the second starter at the cornerback position for the Houston Texans, alongside the third overall pick of the 2021 NFL Draft, Derek Stingley Jr. So that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch. And anything really else? I'm looking at special teams, and I mean, punt return. I mean, that could be interesting to watch. I'm looking at guys like Desmond King the second. He's a guy I've always loved at punt returner. I've always thought he should be punt returning more for the Texans. Amari Rogers is a good punt returner, or solid punt returner. Steven Sims is a guy from Pittsburgh who I really love the Texans bringing in his special teams forces. It'll be interesting to see if he can maybe potentially make the 53-man roster for special teams, because he is a dog for punt returning and kick returning. I think he could potentially make the 53-man roster as a punt and kick returner on special teams if he does well in the preseason and training camp on punt and kick returns. But I mean, besides special teams, I mean, that's really the only thing I'm looking at is, punt and kick returns. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. I mean, user thoughts. Let me know your favorite battle for Texans positions that you're looking at for Texans training camp. I think it's going to be a really fun training camp and preseason. That's it for the video. If you guys enjoyed it, and peace out. Go Texans.